Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this session. I am Saurabh Ratnalikar. I'm 25 years old. I'm a PGP1 participant at IIM Ahmedabad. And now that the CAT dust is settled, I'd just like to talk to you about the other management entrance tests that you might be targeting. So, no matter how the CAT has gone, whether good or bad, it has gone. So now the focus of the management aspirant has to shift to other exams. All right. So I have given after the CAT four of these other management entrance tests, or OMETs as I shall call them after this. The first one was NMAT. After that, I gave the SNAP, after which I gave IIFT, and after that, it was the XAT. Okay. So my plan for this session is to talk about all of these exams, these four exams, one at a time. I will talk about the exams for, let's say, 10 minutes each, give you what worked best for me, some general tips and tricks, what you can do to avoid mistakes. And then towards the end of it, I will invite questions. So we are live on YouTube, and any questions that you have will be taken up. So I'll do my best to answer any questions that you might have. So beginning with perhaps the first exam that I gave after the CAT was the NMAT. Now the NMAT and all OMETs after the CAT are really something to do with speed. Okay, so you cannot expect to just breeze through the paper. You have to be very, very fast. It does not mean that you have to know each and every concept very well. On the contrary, you actually need to just be intelligent with time management. And what that means is that where if you take 30 seconds to realize that this question is actually difficult, you should be able to do that in around 10 seconds. Okay. So a general tip for all OMETs being that these are exams of speed. The XAT will still give you a little more time. But if you manage your time well, you will still do very well. So let's talk about the NMAT. Like the CAT, it also has three sections. Uh, Mainly, they are going to be around the same format. They're just called different names, but you'll have your verbal ability section, verbal. After that, you will have your quantitative ability section. And after that, you will have a DILR type of section as well. Okay. Each of these sections has an equal number of questions, but an unequal spread of time. So where you have 52 minutes for the quantitative ability section, you will only have 28 minutes for the verbal. So that means that even within the section, you have to manage your time differently. Now, there's a good thing here because you can choose the order in which you address your sections. So if you are more comfortable going for the verbal section first, which is what I did, then you might consider ordering it in such a way that gives you a psychological boost. So for me, what works is that if I have a psychological boost at the beginning, then the other two sections become manageable. If I have a bad start, it tends to derail me. So in the NMAT, you are not going to get questions that are usually more difficult than the CAT. Okay, so if you have prepared well for the CAT, then the same preparation should carry you forward with the NMAT as well. But a word of caution, the NMAT, of course, is an adaptive test. So it means that if you're doing too well, you will get harder questions after that. Now, you should do too well because it means that you're on the correct path. So the NMAT such is one of the premier tests that you can give, not just because of the institute that it leads to, which is NMIMS, the main institute in Mumbai, but also because it gives you more than one attempt. Some institutes will not accept anything other than the first. Last year, NMIMS Mumbai did not accept anything other than the first attempt. However, the fact that you have more than one attempt means that you can always improve and they will always count the best score. So when it comes to the NMAT, please approach it with a cool head. Please try that you read each question properly. avoid silly mistakes, and just be confident in your preparation. That is the only thing that will keep your head in the right state. So once you manage that, then the rest of the exam becomes a little bit simpler, psychologically speaking. Now, as far as the level of questions sectionally is concerned, there are differences with the CAT, of course. For example, the NMAT tends to be very vocabulary specific. So there are questions which are going to ask you for synonyms or for antonyms. And the thing about these kind of questions, for example, would be that you either know the answer or you do not know the answer. That makes deciding whether to use too much time on a question easier, because you cannot skip questions in NMAT. It is easier to just attempt something in 10 seconds and then forget about it and move on. So the verbal section tends to be somewhat of a lottery, at least in case of these vocabulary based questions. Next, if you move on to the DILR questions, they are less difficult than the CAT level of sets that you get for DI or LR or mathematical reasoning as well. The problem is that again, here you will not be getting too much time. Okay, so you need to be fast. You need to know how to utilize your time. And the best practice is always to attempt within 1 to 1.5 minutes if you are really, really stuck. So for the NMAT in the DILR section, though the questions do not tend to be as difficult as the CAT, it is still a good idea to prepare your basics very well. There are going to be different kinds of questions as well, which you don't see usually in the CAT. For example, there are going to be certain verbal reasoning questions as well. So, for example, all cats are dogs, some dogs are birds, and so which of these statements is true? One more thing about the NMAT that you have to keep in mind is that there are 5 options. Okay, which means that guesswork is going to be correct only 1 in 5 times. So that warning aside, the NMAT will not let you skip questions. Okay, so please remember that it is always the best policy to just attempt a question, because if you do not attempt all questions and the sectional time runs out, then there are penalties which apply to that sectional score as well as the final score. So that takes me to quant. In quant, again, the level is generally lower than the CAT. The only time I saw that the level was equal to the CAT was when the most difficult questions started appearing. But if you've done your preparation well, if you've done your basics really well, then it should not be a problem that you need to really, really grapple with. So for the NMAT as a whole, the general level of questions tends to be low. Preparation tips for the NMAT specifically would be to give their mock tests. There is an NMAT guide as well, which I can recommend. And vocabulary is very, very important when it comes to the verbal sections. Okay, these are free marks if you know the answer. So that was the NMAT. You're basically going to get a scaled score out of 120 for each section, and added up, it makes for a total scaled score of 360. So I got a total score of 271. This was largely carried by my verbal score. So that brings me to another issue that I wanted to discuss before I move on to the next exam. In all the exams, it should be a theme of yours that you have at least one core strength area. Okay. So for me, it was the verbal section. In all of my exams, the verbal section has counted for at least half of my marks. So even though if there are 3 sections or 4 sections or more than that, let's say the IIFT, half my score still has come from the verbal section. So you should have a core strength area which you can use to pull up your marks in case other sections are going badly, and to then reach a decent score in general. Okay. So with that, After the NMAT is done, which can lead you to a lot of colleges, let's move on to the SNAP. Okay, the SNAP is perhaps one of the most unique exams that I've given. So again, there are 3 iterations of SNAP, and you can give 2 of them. I gave slots 2 and 3, and honestly, it's a lottery. So it's nothing like, slot 1 is going to be easier and slot 3 is going to be the hardest. They, however, will not normalize the scores. Okay, so that is one thing that you need to take care of. Now, the SNAP is a 60-minute test. So maybe the name really is making sense here. When you have a 60-minute test, you truly do not have time to lose. Now, the NMAT was a total of 2 hours, but you will not have that kind of luxury in the SNAP. So it is very, very important to start really strongly. The good thing about the SNAP on that front is that there are 60 questions, but you don't have any sectional cutoffs. You can answer whatever question you want to, and you can attempt as many questions from only a single area if that's what you want. Okay. So again, for me, what worked was that I targeted the verbal section. There are 15 questions in the verbal section. And what worked again was that these 15 questions, again, like the NMAT, you either know or you don't know. There was only one RC set of 3 questions last year, but the other 12 can be solved each within about 25 to 30 seconds. So that means that in about 8 to 10 minutes, I was done with 15 questions. So that automatically gives you a psychological boost when it comes to tackling the rest of the questions. When it comes to DILR or quantitative based questions, again, decision making is what matters. If you see that you can't solve a question after 15 seconds for SNAP, move on. A lot of us get fixated on questions. Okay, so what happens is that we think that, okay, if I just put in 10 to 15 more seconds, I will crack it, or I will make some breakthrough, make some progress. But you do not have those 10 or 15 seconds to spare. So the only reason that I was able to attempt 55 plus questions out of 60 in that 1 hour was because I was able to shatter the ego that gets in between of, no, I can solve every question, or I will not stop until I solve this question. That's fine. You can solve the question in your mocks later on. Okay. But if you can't do it in an exam, then you don't have the time to do it later. So please remember this. A lot of people tend to forget. So what are the benefits of giving SNAP? Well, the most sought after college is SIBM Pune, followed closely by SCM HRD. This is just my personal ranking, but a lot of your aggregators like InsideIIM would also agree that maybe these 2 are the top symbiosis colleges, certainly sought after by students. So what is a good score? If you get a score of about 40, you can confidently say that you are going to get 98 percentile plus. And for Symbiosis Pune, SIBM, the cutoff last year, I believe, was 98.5 if you are a general category person. And for SCM HRD, it tends to be around 97. So you need a score of around 40 plus. Now, what's the marking scheme? The marking scheme is +1 minus 0.25. I was able to score 49.25 out of a maximum possible 60, so that I got a percentile of 99.97. This was across 2 attempts. In the second attempt, I did not score so well. My score was 41.25, I think, but which was still enough for a 98 percentile. But like I said, the higher score counts. So the 49.25 score counted towards the 99.97 percentile. Once you practice the first SNAP mock, you might think that, okay, I have not even been able to attempt 20 or 25 questions. And that is completely normal. Okay. So do not worry about that at all. Speed is only built up once your technique is correct. So it means that if you are not accurate, you should not focus on speed. you should focus on accuracy. 20 correct answers will fetch you 20 marks, but 30 attempted questions where 20 are wrong will not fetch you more, will fetch you just 10. So please remember that it is more important to cultivate accuracy and then go for speed. As far as the preparation itself for SNAP is concerned, the VARC section tends to be easier than the CAT. The DILR section also tends to be easier than the CAT. And the quantitative section also tends to be easier than the CAT. So the only tip that I would give here is that really, really work on speed. Because if you do that, and if you've done well in your CAT, if your CAT preparation is in order, then there is no reason why you should not be able to score well in SNAP as well. So just make sure that the moment you start the exam, you hit the ground running. In the first 10 minutes, try to solve as many questions as you can. And then for the next 50 minutes, you might consider just skimming through questions, scanning the questions, seeing what is doable, what is not. And if something is not doable in the current moment, skip. So let me just tell you how the human mind tends to work sometimes. So if you have if you have a question that you just look and skip, okay, then in the subconscious mind, your mind is still trying to solve it. So you might go on to another question, but you are still working on it somewhere. Your brain is using some amount of resources to work on it. So do not think that skipping is 100% skipping. When you skip a question, you do still work on it from time to time subconsciously. So I'll just take this break to answer some questions that we have coming in. Okay, so Tanya is asking about how important and time taking is the essay section in XAT. Okay, so that provides me the perfect opportunity to, in fact, move on to the XAT. So the XAT is the aptitude test for XLRI as well as XIMB. So with these tests, the XAT test is one of the most difficult tests. Okay, so Tanya, I'll answer your question in about 5 minutes, once I've covered the general gist of how the XAT exam is constructed. This is longer and is not so demanding of speed as it is of pure accuracy. And the level of questions often tends to be much higher than that of the CAT. But however, the result, if you do well in your XAT, it is very, very useful because XLRI is one of the top colleges. It's the oldest preschool in India. So there's definitely a lot of prestige involved if you do well here. Now, if I speak about the paper itself, you do not have sectional time limits, first of all. So last year we had 2 hours and 45 minutes for the part A, and then you had another 20 minutes, 25 minutes for part B. Okay, part B is going to consist of GK questions, and it's going to consist of an essay. Now, to answer Tanya's question here, it is very important to do well in your essay. Usually you will have a choice of 2 essays, you answer only one. And why it is important is because even though that is not counted towards your percentile, and of course essays are very subjective themselves, so you can't grade them and then make them have a percentile for that. But the essay is important when it comes to your personal interview stage, because if you've not done so well in your essay, if you've come up with a substandard essay, then they will ask you about it in your personal interview. This has happened to a few friends of mine. The same thing goes for the GK questions as well. So if you have not answered very well in the GK question, it affects your PI. So even though it is part A that completely determines your percentile, part B is very important as far as getting a call is concerned, and then how you do once you get the call also is concerned. So make sure that you do not take those sections lightly. Okay. I believe there is no negative marking when it comes to GK. So of course it makes sense to attempt all the questions. But that being said, make sure that you are reading your newspapers, you are improving your static GK as well. And that should put you in good stead for the part B. So speaking about part A, before I take more questions, part A tends to be full of VARC, but now VARC has poems as well. Okay, so that means that you are going to have to deal with a kind of question which you have not prepared for, because CAT, NMAT, SNAP, IIFT, none of these will have poems. Okay, it is only the XAT which does. So when you have poems, what you are expected to do is basically understand what the author really means. So something can be said using some words, but really the meaning is something different. So, for example, if I use the word blue in a certain context, you could mean sadness instead of just the blue sky. So, for poems, it is very important to understand the real meaning or the revealed meaning of what is really what really the author or the poet wants to say. Okay, when it comes to quat, you will have questions mostly on the level of CAT itself, but there are certain questions which involve, say, trigonometry of higher levels, trigonometric formulae, trigonometric identities, which you will not have as part of your CAT syllabus. So it tends to be slightly stretched when it comes to the XAT. You will have to study a little more stuff. And it doesn't help that there are 5 options again. So you really have to be very, very careful in answering all of these questions. Now, if you think that 5 options is very scary, please also understand that setting 5 options as an examiner is tricky as well. So it's not very difficult to find the right answer. Just like the CAT, there are probably 2 options which are close enough and therefore will confuse you. So don't let that psychologically affect you. Okay. And when it comes to DILR, you don't have DILR as such in XAT. You have a completely different section called the decision making section. Here, it is a struggle, no doubt about it. My strategy for this section, because it tends to be, because many options can sound correct to you. Okay. It's really a lottery. The only way I think you can get better at it is just through practice and solving more sectionals or even full mocks. But one thing that I found worked for me was that if I just increased the number of attempts, then it would increase my chances in general, because I know that even though there are 5 options, only maybe 2 of them are close enough. Okay. So that being said, I took the chance. I attempted all 21 questions in the DM section, and I still managed to get a score of 8.5, which was 96 plus percentile in the DM section that year. So find out ways to game the system in a way. So this is what worked for me. For the XAT, if you leave too many questions, they'll start marking you negatively minus 0.1 for every question you leave beyond, let's say, 8 or 10 questions. I'm not entirely sure about that. So make sure that even if you are leaving questions, you're leaving them strategically, where the minus 0.1 is better than the minus 0.25 that you would have gotten if you had tried answering that question. So again, when it comes to the XAT, a score of 30 in part A will tend to take you above the 93 to 94 percentile that is required to get the first call from XLRI. Okay, I think their HRM cutoff last year was around 93, 94 as well. So it is enough to get that call. So before I move on, let me just answer a few other questions. There's a question from Ankita and there's a question from Neha. I'll take Ankita's question first. What kind of mindset is preferred while solving DILR and VARC section? And what are strategies to score maximum in VARC consistently? Okay. So the kind of mindset that is preferred, Ankita, would be just a cool and a calm mindset. Okay. You cannot be afraid. So there is always one section or one set in DILR that is always going to be doable. And trust me, if you can do that one set well, if you answer it well, so let's say we're talking about the CAT, for example. You are going to answer 4 questions of a set, and let's say they are all correct because it was an easier set. You're getting 12 marks. 12 marks is enough to get your 75th percentile as well, and maybe 16 to cross the 80th percentile. So if you manage that, then again, accuracy being more important. Okay. So just understand that if it is not your strength, then all you have to do is survive. Okay. Because sectional percentiles matter. So you always will get one set. And okay, fine, take 20 minutes for it. But do that one set well. And then maybe pick up the next easiest one. So if you can manage 1.5, 2 sets, you will comfortably clear the cutoff. Okay, so that's what I also told myself. I was never very good at DILR. The highest percentile I ever got sectionally, and that was 90. And so for me, it was just about survival. So I knew that if I selected 1.5 to 2 sets properly, I could do it. So how do you select these sets also? Please go through each set once. Okay, before you start attempting, please take the time 2 or 3 minutes to start to just analyze what kind of questions are there. What is an easier set? What is a difficult set? What is a set that you've never seen before? So if you do the analysis properly and if you pick and choose well, then you will not waste time. Because the consequence of not choosing a set well is that if you decide to abandon a set after 10 and 15 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes, then you've made really no progress and you've just lost 10 or 15 minutes. Okay? So please just make sure that you trust yourself, keep cool, and just answer questions which are easier first. This applies honestly to all sections. As far as VARC, consistency, yes, consistency is a problem when it comes to VARC. What I would recommend is that in questions where you don't have negative marking, then attempt it. And for RCs, use an approach called a paragraph to questions approach. Often, what happens is that if you spend 5 minutes reading the entire essay, then you might forget a few things when you go to the questions after 5 minutes, right? So instead of that, just take in information in chunks, in paragraphs. Read a paragraph, go to the questions. See what you can answer using just information you've gotten in that paragraph. Maybe there is a specific question that you can answer. If so, well and good. Otherwise, move on to the next paragraph. And do this, and it'll really, really help because you don't have to remember the whole thing all at once. Of course, there are going to be certain questions which require a complete understanding of the essay, but there are always going to be specific questions as well. Okay, again, the trick here to do better in VARC is to read more, to become a faster reader, to memorize certain important points in chunks. Okay, so usually the best of the best students in whether it be VARC or DILR, they use very little of their pen and papers. So a lot of people, the best of the best DILR solvers, are not even touching their pen to the paper when they are solving things in their head. So just like that, it is much easier, I believe, to at least retain information which you're reading. Like, okay, not all of us can be geniuses who can solve complex puzzles in our heads, but definitely we can remember what we just read 1 minute ago. So try not to make notes too many times during the VARC section. A score of around 36 in the CAT at least would have gotten you around your 99th percentile. But even in the other exams, which I'm talking about, let's say in the XAT, for example, a score of around 17 was enough to get you your 98, 99 percentile sectionally. Okay, there are 26 questions in the XAT verbal section. So just finally wrapping up XAT, the XAT is a difficult paper, so there's no doubt about it. And some people might get discouraged also by the fact that there are only a handful of prime or premier P schools which are accepting XAT scores, but they have increased. They have increased their partnership schools in later years. So there are again a lot of avenues. Here's a golden rule for all of you: 75. Okay, 75 percentile sectionally or overall is in most cases going to be good enough to fetch you a decent B score. Okay. So 75 percentile can be achieved by every single one of us. Okay, because it's not really that difficult if you work hard. And all of us are definitely working hard, but it's important also to work smart. So a lot of mistakes that people did last year, and I think they continue to do mistakes, is that they do not improve upon weak areas. So if there is a weak area that desperately calls out for improvement, then please go ahead and make all of those improvements as well. Okay. So there's a question on the YouTube chat as well. I'll just answer that. It's from Ribhav. Okay. He's saying that he did not study much outside of classes, and how does he spend the next months to prepare for XAT and CMAT and CET, and if is getting 99.99 percentile possible. So is it possible? Yes, it is definitely possible. I know people who have prepared for 3 weeks and cracked the CAT. I know people who have prepared for 3 months and cracked the CAT. And cracking the CAT is really not about the amount of time you put in as much as the quality of time you put in. Okay, so it is definitely possible, Ribhav. But the thing is that I cannot tell you much about CMAT and CET. I haven't given these. I will tell you about the XAT. The XAT is harder than the CAT. So if you really put your mind to it, then definitely you can get any percentile that you will deserve according to your preparation. But I would suggest that you do use class materials, because classes, being very competitive and everything, they do tend to keep up with the best practices and the latest tips and tricks. So I still suggest, if you do want to learn by yourself, at least get material from the classes. Okay, you can pick and choose whatever you like. Now, when it comes to the final exam that I'm going to talk about, IIFT, I think it's on 18th of December. The IIFT is also going to be all about speed. However, this is one of the trickier exams. The first thing is that there have been instances of buggy interfaces, and the screen not showing the questions properly. Some of the options are not being visible. The answers not getting captured. I don't mean to discourage any one of you, but I'm just narrating what happened last year. So last year, the authorities did not even consider those students whose exam, let's say, got over maybe 5 minutes early for some reason without any fault of their own. The other drawback is that you are only going to be able to use this score for one institute, which is IIFT. Okay, they have multiple campuses, the Delhi one being the most sought after. However, there is a lot of competition. 30 to 40,000 students will give the IIFT invariably, and you will perhaps have to be in the top 1% to actually make it through. So, given that, the IIFT is still a very crackable exam. So, the only thing that you have to worry about is that there is a threshold score. Okay, so you have to get a higher score than a certain limit. Okay, in every single section. And if you fail to do that in a single section, just one section, if you fail to do that, you will not get called. So it happened to a friend of mine who 99.5 percentile, but didn't make one cutoff, and unfortunately he couldn't get the call. So how do you avoid this? Spend enough time on each section first to clear the cutoffs. Okay. So only when you think that you've answered enough questions that you will clear any cutoff that they might have, only then start maximizing on your strength areas. So for example, if verbal is my strength area, I will not just simply solve all the verbal questions. I will solve enough verbal questions first, enough DILR questions first, enough of the quantitative questions first, and enough of the GK questions first. And only then will I move on to maximizing my score. So be very careful. Again, general knowledge is very, very important here. Just like the XAT, you are actually this is actually going to count, first of all, in your total, in your final percentile as well. And again, there being sectional cutoffs, this is even more important. So what to do in the IIFT? Let's talk about the level of questions first. Now, as far as the level of questions is concerned, for VARC, it tends to be roughly the same as CAT, perhaps a little lower. Okay. As far as DI and LR are concerned, now DI is very difficult. And the only reason it's very difficult is because you don't get calculators. So there is no online calculator as well, on-screen calculator as well. And the calculations tend to be very, very complicated. So they are not straightforward at all. And even if you try to use approximations, sometimes the options are so close that your method of approximation might not lead you to the correct answer. With that apart, LR tends to be easy. LR is definitely lower than CAT levels. And as far as the quantitative questions are concerned, again, around 80% of the level of CAT. Some of the harder questions do tend to be equal to the level of CAT. But all in all, it is doable. So finally, coming to the GK questions, this again tends to be a lottery. But if you focus on certain static GK that you should know, and if you focus on business news, and if you also focus on international trade news, because IIFT is Foreign Institute of Foreign Trade, correct? So if you focus on that aspect as well, if you know certain terms related to import, export, and macroeconomic policy, then that will help in the GK section as well, because they do ask, what is the meaning of this term? So that is part of your preparation. Okay, this will not just help you give the exam, but it will also help you give the interview later. So that is the IIFT 110 questions in total in a total time of 2 hours. So again, quite like the snap, you really, really need to be very, very fast. At least in the snap, a lot of the questions tend to be much easier than the CAT, but in IIFT, the level is not that low. So if you can answer 50 out of 60 questions in snap, it does not mean that you can just extrapolate that number and say, okay, I can answer 90 to 100 questions. That's not going to happen. So I personally could answer around 78 to 80 questions. I'm not entirely sure. And that was still enough for 99.96 percentile. So imagine I've left 30 questions and I've still gotten such a high percentile. That is because the level of questions is very different. And again, it is very, very important to pick and choose your questions wisely. Okay, you cannot afford to waste time. So with that, I think I've provided just an overview of the OMETs that all of you are going to take one day or the other. You can always reach out to me on LinkedIn or just email me. I'll leave my email later on. But let's take some questions. So there's a question from Neha. Neha is asking, what did you do to keep calm the day before the exam? Okay, I'll answer that part of the question first. But the next part reads, how to manage the time before the exam in the exam hall and what if something goes wrong? Okay, so what did I do to keep calm the day before the exam? I didn't do anything. On the day before the exam, I was literally just unwinding because I do not believe that last minute preparation is productive and healthy for the mind. So before the CAT, before IIFT, SNAP, NMAT, XAT, one day before that, I did not do anything. If you have to do something, do it, finish it 2 days before the exam. Okay, any last mock that you want, any revision that you want to do, please finish it 2 days before the exam. It is very, very important to relax your mind. Your brain is also a muscle. It gets tired after working very hard. And if you don't relax it, especially on the day you need to, then it will be difficult to get your mind fully functioning. So please relax. Don't do anything the day before the exam. Maybe watch your favorite TV show. If you've been off social media and not been preparing, maybe go back there. See if whatever you can do to relax. I know that a lot of us are thinking about how this exam is my only chance or how this exam, everything depends on this exam. But to be fair, there are a lot of exams. You have to do well once. Okay. You can only be in one B school at a time. Please remember. So it's okay to get 99 rejections if you can get one acceptance. Okay, so that is something that always kept me peaceful and calm during the exam. It's the same thing for managing the time before the exam in the exam hall. In the exam hall, do not focus on what others are doing. Okay, because it's all about what you want to do. It's all about your preparation, and it's just all about your own calm and peace of mind. So do not focus on what others are doing. Make sure that you visit the washroom whenever you need to. Okay, so that there is no nature's call that disturbs your flow whenever you're in the middle of the exam. Okay, so and what if something goes wrong? I'm not sure that I understand that question very clearly. But if you're talking about a case where, let's say, you're not getting a certain answer, or you're not able to answer a lot of questions, that is fine. Come back to the questions. A lot of times, what happens to aspirants is that they are not able to even look at all the questions once. They get stuck and they remain stuck, and they never move ahead and watch and look at the other questions. So it's often a good idea to just structure your questions into easy, moderate, and difficult. Solve the easy ones first, solve the moderate ones, and then you will get time maybe to do the difficult ones, attempt them. Okay, so at least this way, you can control to an extent how much things are going wrong. Okay, so make sure that you follow certain best practices and you should be fine. Okay, so Neil Madhav is asking on the chat, can you tell how to prepare for SNAP? Okay, yeah, sure. So for SNAP preparation, the material is not very different. Okay, I would suggest the best way of preparation, if you've prepared for the CAT, obviously, is to just give more and more mocks. Okay, so what you really need in SNAP is speed, because the concepts are easier. It's easier in VARC, it's easier in DILR, and it's easier in quant as well. So what you really are being tested on is speed, and speed is one way of testing time management, decision making. So you don't need to be the brightest person to get a really good score in Snap. You just need to be the smartest person. Smartest in the sense that you know when you don't know something, and you quickly use that time to solve a question that you do know. Okay. So I hope that the session was helpful to you. I will just, you can look me up on LinkedIn, Saurabh Ratnalikar. I'm the only person with that name on LinkedIn. And if there are any other questions, I'll be happy to take them. So let me just have a look. Okay. So with that being said, I think let's close the session. It's been wonderful. And you can always reach out to me at any point. Just message me on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to help you, not just for the exams, but even for any GDPI preparation that you have. Okay. So thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience. I love taking your questions, and I hope you're able to take something from today's session. Please feel free to reach out to me whenever you feel low, or whenever you feel unconfident, or whenever you just need a boost. Okay. So thank you very much. And I'll see you sometime soon.